Hello, this is Vulturefire, and it's time for part 4 of my field guide for the Vortex. So, this part is the Aspect of Conquest, which is, I would say, generally one of the harder aspect fights, especially with idols enabled. Um, so, let's talk through it. First up, their main themes: quick scaling, healing and shield, arcane, and buffs on death. Um, so the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to go through some things for all of them. I'm going to start by going through the sort of each of the dogs individually, and then I'm going to show you what they all do in practice because of how the turn cycles work. So to begin with, the fighter starts with 5 ranks of fortress. So I'm going to call them fighter, cleric, rogue, wizard, which is like a D&D party basically, because that's easier to talk about them that way if I give them names. Because in game, if you click on them, they're all just called Aspect of Conquest, which does bug me a little bit. But so we have, fighter starts with Fortress 5, cleric starts with Lifesteal 6, the rogue and the wizard do not start with any buffs. So let's talk about the fighter. So the fighter's opportunist attack is the one you're most likely to hit, of course, because all of the ways that these guys get opportunist will be either Manic Presence Weather or the Idol of Hunt. And in both of those cases, it will be opportunist divided among all enemies. And because the front enemy gets the opportunist first, and the fighter is the front enemy in this fight, it is most common that you will get hit by this opportunist attack. And what it does is it deals 12 damage and gives all enemies plated 2. So it's a relatively low damage attack, and honestly, by the time you get to this area, the plated 2 probably not a huge deal, especially since it's a wide fight, and that means that when opportunist is divided out, the fighter will usually only get like 1 or 2 ranks, which is pretty safe to trip. So opportunist, not a huge concern in this fight, which is nice. That's one thing going for you. The normal action this thing does. So Conquest is effectively a fight that has a 2-turn cycle. Like a number of other fights in the game, each enemy does their moves in a specific order instead of it being random like Avarice was. And so in this case, they're going to alternate between their 2 moves on different turns. So on turn 1, Aspect of Conquest will give 100 shield to itself. It's going to attack for 25 damage, and then it's going to increase the damage of this attack by 5. And then on turn 2, it's going to deal 10 damage to the player and gain Fortress 2 and Reflect 3. Then on turn 3, it's going to do the first one again. So it's going to get 100 shield, but it's going to do 30 damage, increased by 5. Turn 4, it'll deal 10 damage, Fortress Reflect. Turn 5, it'll gain 100 shield, deal 35 damage, and so on. So the most important thing to note here is, because it is a 2-turn cycle, assuming you are not freezing it, it is going to maintain those 5 ranks of fortress it starts with, and it's going to gain +1 reflect every turn, assuming there are no idols active. Now, if there are idols active, that will increase that can potentially increase how much fortress and reflect is gained. If you have 1 or 2 idols active invoked, there will be 1 idol active in the fight, and 2 times 1, and each idol is a 20% bonus. And 2 times 1.2 is 2.4, which is going to round back down to 2, so you're still only going to get 2 fortress. But 3 times 1.2 is 3.6, which means that it will start getting 4 reflect, which means that it's going to stack reflect substantially faster. Because if it was gain reflect 2 baseline, right, it would get reflect 2, 1 wears off at the start of the next turn, 1 wears off right before it gets to the end. It would basically always be at 1 or 2 reflect. With reflect 3, it's going to be at 3 after the first time it does it, then 1 is going to wear off when it does its first action, another one's going to wear off, and then it's going to go to reflect 4 at the end of turn 4, then reflect 5 at the end of turn 6, and so on. With 2 idols active, it's going to go to 4 immediately, and then it's going to go to 6 the next time, and then it's going to go to 8, so it's going to stack quite a bit faster. Still, generally, the reflect is not a huge deal. It's not going to stack as crazy fast as, for example, Thornberries can. The summoned Thornberries in Area 1 can stack reflect very quickly. And you're going to want to have Arcane for this fight anyway. But if you are a multi-hit deck, that is something to be concerned with, is that if you're playing a slower deck, a multi-hit deck that is not winning quickly, you do need to account for the reflect, and you will want to have some way to get through the fortress, especially if you're fighting idols. Because the other thing is, I said that 2.4 rounds down, 2.6 does not. 2.8 does not. And 2.8 is how much it would get from 2 idol. If you have invoked 3 idols in the shrine, there will be 2 idols active in the fight, and that means 40% bonus to everything it does, and that means Fortress 3 each time, which means just like we talked about reflect stacking, the Fortress is going to stack. And on top of that, Manic Presence can give it more Fortress, which it won't naturally lose because it's stacking it. So you'll either need to freeze it or use Arcane in order to get this Fortress under control, and if you do not, you are going to have a bad time, especially because the Cleric gives tough on top of the other thing. So the Cleric's opportunist attack deals 2x5 damage and gives lifesteal 4 to all enemies. This is honestly not a huge deal, depending on how much powerful it has, although opportunist attacks are stifled, which means they get half bonus from damage modifiers, which means that it only gets half benefit here from powerful. So if it has powerful 2, it will do 3x5 damage, for example. So still, like I said, opportunist relatively safe. The lifesteal I don't think is a huge concern, especially if Idol of Hunger isn't active, and if Idol of Hunger is active, like you're already dealing with lifesteal. So its normal actions divides 200 health and purity 6 among all enemies and gives them tough 3. So this is not actually, strictly speaking, the order. The order is divide health, give tough, divide purity, which is relevant if Nullify is out. But so you may know that 6 divided by 4 is 1.5. 1.5 rounds up to 2. What this means is that, in effect, the Cleric is going to heal every single one. If all 4 dogs are alive, they will all be healed for 50, and then they will all gain tough 3, and they will all gain purity 2, which is, because this is a 2-turn cycle, that means, on average, they each get 1 purity per turn. So if you're a deck that does not apply a ton of debuffs, but has a couple of really key debuffs, so for example, a freeze deck is the most common example of this, and you know you're fighting Conquest, you need to have purity breaking ready to go. And you may want to prioritize items that let you apply debuffs on spell or strike, because that will go a long way towards helping you deal with the purity. The other note here is that even with 2 idols, this will still only be purity 2 per enemy. But because they get tough 3 and it's a 2-turn cycle, that amount of tough is just going to keep going up, which is going to make it hard to break through, and that's going to be even more damage reduction on the idol, on the fighter. So having percent-based, having some way to target back enemies, or having some way to increase your percentage, or having Arcane, is going to be crucial for actually taking down this fight. Then on the second turn in the cycle, they deal 6x4 damage, and then they divide 60 health among all enemies and an extra 4 health per damage dealt. So if they hit you with all that, that's 6x4 is 24. 24 times 4 is 96. So it's a total of 156 healing, assuming that they hit you for the full damage. Because if you evade, or if you are able to get damage mitigation out, weak and tough, that sort of thing, then this will not be as much healing. But overall, this means between these 2 actions, because the other thing to remember is, of course, that's 6x4 base, and they will be getting other buffs from idols, or from the other dogs, or from the weather. So that can easily be more than 6x4 damage. And then what that'll mean is you get even more healing. So they will be doing an average of 50 healing to all enemies every single turn. So you need to be able to outdamage that. You need you need more than 50 damage a turn, and because these guys, of course, start with a decent amount of health, they start with several hundred health, you'll need to be able to do ideally 100 plus damage per turn, probably ideally quite a bit more. That's not too unusual for an Area 4 thing, but especially being able to hit back enemies with that, not using strikes to do it, can be trickier. So on top of that, of course, this enemy is the reason that Idol of Hunger makes this fight kind of a nightmare. Because, of course, without Idol of Hunger, then this Divide Health effect is just going to heal them up to a max of their full health. It won't heal back, it won't give them any shields or anything. But if Idol of Hunger is active, then every time an enemy gets overheal, that gets converted into shields, which means that even if you haven't hit the back enemies, this first turn they'll give out, and it'll be plus 20%, so 50 times 1.2 is 60. So you'll get 60 shields to everyone on every other turn, and then roughly 60 shields on the off turns as well. And this plus extra healing per damage dealt, I'm pretty sure that will get double bonus from idols, by which I mean if you did 10 damage, or if it was, so let's say it was, pretend it was 10 base damage instead of 6, just because that's easier to do math with, then it would do 12 damage, and then instead of getting 4 health per damage dealt, it would be 1.2, extra 1.2, so it would be 4.8 health per damage dealt. I'm not sure exactly how the rounding works, but the point is, instead of 10 times 4, it would be 12 times 4.8, so you get substantially more. Next up, the Rogue. So you'll notice there are 3 actions here. I'll get to that in a moment. First up, the Opportunist, deal 2x6 damage, divide powerful 5 among all enemies. This is only really a problem if you are down to only 1 enemy, but honestly, if you've killed the front 2 enemies, if you trip Opportunist on this one, and the other enemies are still alive, that means you trip Opportunist like 3 times this turn, presumably you know what you're doing if you've drawn that many cards. And otherwise, it means that the front 2 are already dead, and in that case, you're probably still in an okay position because you've killed the 2 toughest ones, and now you've just got the squishies left. But could theoretically be a problem. But it's normal action, so it deals 4x4 damage, and then it increases the number of hits by 1 for next time. So first time it'll hit you for 4x4, second time it'll hit you for 4x5, and so on. Then, on the next turn, you'll get Frenzy 1 and Powerful 6. I don't have this noted properly. It's Powerful 6 this turn, or more specifically for its next turn. And then on turn 3 and turn 5 and so on, assuming that you don't dispel the Frenzy, what's going to happen is it's going to do 3x4 AoE damage by powerful 2 among all enemies, and then because it has Frenzy, it's going to immediately then go back and do the turn 1 action again, which is the multi-hit that gets more and more hits. So this is the one that I generally want to have killed first, because otherwise it is going to keep scaling up the other enemies with powerful, and it is going to keep hitting you harder and harder, and you're going to have to keep managing this Frenzy, which can be tricky because, again, the Purity is generally going to protect the Frenzy. If you can't, you'll have to cut through the Purity that the Cleric is providing. Another note here is that because this thing has 3 turns, if you dispel the Frenzy, this will get it desynced from the rest. That's not necessarily a huge concern, but it is something to be aware of. It's just that if you are seeing turn cycles that don't look like I'm going to show you once we get done with talking about Wizard's actions. Oh, okay. I had to make sure that my mic didn't get unplugged anyway. The reason why you'll be seeing different things is because dispelling the Frenzy will desync at the Rogue. By which I mean it will then need 3 turns to every other enemy's 2, so things won't line up in the same way. Finally, the Wizard. The Wizard's Opportunist action is probably the most annoying. Apply 20 Arcane and nullify 1. It's also the least likely to happen because it's at the back, and honestly, I don't think this is a major concern. It's very rare that you'll actually see that Opportunist attack. But you will hate this thing. Because normal actions, turn 1 is going to apply AoE, which means Area of Effect, which means you and your allies will get Arcane Weakness 1, Weak 2, Enfeebled 1 in that order. This means that you will spend half of the fight Enfeebled if you don't have a good amount of Purity, because you will need Purity 3 to block the Enfeebled. So that is a thing. You'll be Enfeebled for roughly half the fight. This isn't necessarily the worst, because Enfeebled will help you if you're at a negative damage modifier, for example, because you're weak and enfeebled, and the front aspect has 5 Fortress and has tough. So you will be at, on turn 2, a minus 100% damage modifier against the front aspect, or I guess minus 90% because it will have whatever. So there is a soft cap of 70% on damage mitigation. So the 90% will get scaled down to like 75%-ish, I think. No, exactly 75%. Because, yeah, 90 will actually be minus 90% damage taken actually gets soft capped at 75%. But that's not going to help you. You're still going to, like I said, it's not going to be a good time if you were trying to hit the front one without Arcane. So, sets up Arcane Weakness on turn 1, and on turn 2, it's going to do 10 AoE random status. Again, AoE means you and your allies. And 20 and then an extra 20 Arcane just for you, the player. And then both of these values are going up by 6. So this means the wizard can just blow up your summons. Even things like, for example, turrets, like paladin turrets, really, really bad in this fight because they are going to struggle to get any damage in against the fighter, and they are really going to struggle to survive if the wizard decides to arcane detonate them, decides to arcane weakness and then blow them up, or if the wizard decides to freeze them, especially with the reflect on the fighter. So I would not bring summons into this fight. Oh, and your summons will get murdered by this attack starting on turn 3. So between all of these things, I don't like summons in this fight. Trill's probably the only summon that you maybe could get away with, and the reason Trill can get away with that is because Trill has Shield Link, and Trill can dispel the buffs on the fighter, which will make it possible to get through this fight with Trill. But if you're not using Trill, do not rely on summons for this fight. It's not going to go well for you. So, putting it all together, here's what turn 1 looks like. First off, bunch of shield on this guy. So he's going to set up a whole lot of shield on himself. He's going to do 25 damage, and it's going to increase for next cycle. Then, heals for everyone, tough for everyone, and purity for everyone. Then, damage and an extra hit. And finally, a bunch of debuffs that are going to make your next turn worse. It's going to hurt your damage output next turn. So we're doing, we do have tough and weak both coming out on turn 1, which means at turn 2 you'll be at a minus 50% damage modifier, or you'll be at a minus 25% because of this. But you'll be at a minus 50% base damage modifier going into turn 2. So that is a thing that will absolutely be something you have to deal with. Freezing this makes your life easier. Freezing this makes your life easier. These two are low priority freezes the first time around, although if you freeze them, they won't increase for next time. But these two are going to do way more to mess up your next turns usually, either because the tough and the purity are a problem, or because the weak and the enfeebled are going to be a problem. So if you have access to freezing, whether that is an actual freeze card or a cryo flask, use them accordingly. Then on turn 2, you're going to get, this one is going to do relatively low damage. It's going to do 10 damage, 2 fortress, 3 reflect. So it's not actually shielding itself any further, but it is gaining more defensive buffs, and it is dealing a small amount of damage. Then this one's going to do the damage that does the heal afterwards. It's going to do 6x4, then it immediately does the divided heal, the heal that scales based on damage, and it's going to do 60 heals. And these are separate, which means that if you have Frail out, you'll need 2 ranks of Frail to block both of these. Then this guy does not attack on turn 2, fortunately. So turn 2 is a relatively low damage turn, because you only have the Frenzy and the 6, and then this gains 6 powerful, but doesn't actually deal damage. Although, I say it's low damage, this guy absolutely can do serious damage to you if you didn't get rid of the Arcane Weakness, especially if this decides to shock you. So, because the last thing that'll happen is you get hit by random status, and then AoE Arcane. The one nice thing in this fight is that you'll notice in both of these that you only have one enemy that is doing debuffs, and that's this guy, which means if you have purity, it will survive until the wizard's turn. You don't have to worry about purity being eaten by the others. Then, going back to turn 1 of the cycle, if it isn't the first cycle, this guy has Frenzy, and so that means that he's going to do his Frenzy attack, and then assuming the Frenzy wasn't dispelled, he's going to do this attack where he does 3x4, he's going to give everybody 2 powerful, again 6 divided, and then he's going to go straight into this second attack. So, one thing you'll notice here is that any of these you can remove, make your life easier. For example, let's say that you have killed the rogue. So the rogue's gone. We are ignoring the rogue's attacks. At that point, each turn you're dealing with a single hit, or every 2 turns you're dealing with 1 hit, some healing and AoE stuff, some arcane and weak and stuff, some arcane, weak, and enfeebled, then status, and then relatively low damage because this attack doesn't scale in stone. It's not getting any powerful anymore because this guy's dead. So it only has how much powerful it had. This attack doesn't scale. So you've got like relatively low damage and then this guy. So if, like after Rogue is dead, you've taken a lot of the damage down and you were just dealing with really damage from this, assuming that you have a way to deal with this big hit using like evasion or something. So looking at this, you may assume that the kill order is you kill this one, you kill the rogue, then you kill the wizard, and then you kill the cleric, and then you finish, or you kill like the rogue and the wizard top priority, then you kill fighter, then you kill cleric. However, there's one thing we haven't talked about yet, and that's the death effects. So every time you kill a dog, they're going to buff all of the others, and that buff is different for each one. When you kill the fighter, it divides 300 shield among all the survivors and gives them Fortress 3. And worth noting, that's not dividing Fortress 3, that's giving them all straight up 3 ranks of Fortress. When you kill the cleric, it divides 300 healing among all survivors and gives them each lifesteal 10. So they'll have 100% lifesteal effectively. When you kill the rogue, it divides powerful 20 among all survivors. And when you kill the wizard, you've made a mistake because it gives every single survivor 5 ranks of each rune and 5 ranks of each barrier. So that's Arcane Rune 5, Shock Rune 5, Frost Rune 5, Arcane Barrier 5, Frost Barrier 5, Frost Rune 5. The reason this is a problem is because if you're trying to actually deal damage or apply status, which are the 2 main ways that you're going to kill things, your life just got a lot harder. In particular, giving the rogue runes, often a bad idea, because then it will actually be able to use them. The fighter isn't great at using runes since it only does single hits. Cleric can also use runes somewhat effectively. Generally speaking, you want to kill the wizard last, or only kill it when you have the fighter almost dead, or if you have some really, really good way to dispel. Because you, like I said, do not want to deal with all of these debuffs. Let me double check that it is 5. So these aren't affected by idle bonuses. This is only going to be 5 even with idols active, but still a nightmare. So you kill the rogue first, and part of that is powerful 20 among all survivors isn't actually that big of a deal. Gives each enemy like 6 powerful, which sounds like a lot, but if you're playing depth 4, you're probably aware that like 6 powerful is not that much at this stage of the game. Especially because the fighter and the wizard are effectively only doing single hits. The cleric is only doing a multi-hit every other turn. It's not nothing, but it is going to be much less than the damage you're taking from the rogue still being alive. The cleric going down means that you stop dealing with the heals. And that divided 300 health, that's like 1 cleric turn. And the lifesteal 10, not a huge deal, especially if the rogue is already dead, because the wizard can't use the lifesteal at all, and the fighter can. But most of the fighter's health is in shield. But the fighter's actual health is relatively low. It's largely shields, which means that if hunger isn't active, because again, hunger means that healing gets converted to shields. If hunger isn't active, pretty easy to just kill the fighter. I'm realizing now I meant to set up music for this, and then I just didn't, because one day was nice enough to give me the background music. Next time, for real. I could add it in post, but I don't know editing. Anyway, diatribe over. Or not diatribe, digression over. So the point is, I would generally say kill order. You want to kill one of these 2 first, and then you're going to kill these 2 are basically the ones that you kill first. The order doesn't super matter. Ideally, this one first, but if the cleric happens to die first, that's not the end of the world. You want to kill one of these, then kill the other one. Then once both of these are dead, you're usually fine to kill wizard if you can, and then finally, fighter after wizard or before wizard, either way. Depending on how fast your kills are, you may just have to, for your own safety, kill the wizard sooner, because the amount of arcane and other status it can dump on you can become majorly problematic. Because if random statuses for enough that it's like double freezing you or double shocking you, which can especially happen if you don't have any extra max status, that can be a major, major concern. And that means that like the wizard just has to die. Because if you can find, especially if you have any evasion, like managing the fighter, much, much easier. And you can just like, if you have evasion, you can stall out the fighter indefinitely as long as the others are dead. So my big tip for this fight, have backline hits. And AoE hits are risky because if you AoE kill, or your AoE hits into this guy is stacking Reflect, so that can be a problem, especially if you are not playing a lot of shield. So ideally you want, and also AoE hits tend to not be huge on their own. So you want backline kills, you want AoE status, you want AoE debuffs throughout this purity, and you want to be very aware of what they're going to do when they die, which means being aware that killing the wizard is a trap. You do not kill the wizard first. Killing the wizard first is going to cause problems unless you are absolutely certain your deck can handle it. It is worth noting one advantage of Hunger being active, if Hunger is actually in the fight, is that Hunger will give them Berserk, which can be nice because it means their death triggers won't go off until end of turn, which means you can potentially kill multiple of them in the same turn without having to deal with, for example, if you kill Wizard first, but Hunger is giving it Berserk, then it won't actually pass out all of its stuff until it ends its turn. So you could potentially, say, still take out Cleric as well, or take out Wizard and Rogue, even though Wizard technically went down first, with that being relatively safe. So, things to know. Another thing that is nice is if you're doing a big AoE attack to kill them and Hunger isn't active, so they don't have Berserk and they're going to do their thing the instant they die, you don't have to worry about, like, if this was in front, your AoE attack would hit it first, and if it died, you could then potentially be surprised by the barrier and then explode on later enemies, but that won't happen here. So, you finally killed Aspect of Conquest. What do you get? And the answer is really good cards. So this is the first of the two cards. It's called Conquering Tactics, and it is one of those create cards where you create your choice of 4 different options. And all 4 options here are pretty good. I don't have these in the same order they're in game. I have them in alphabetical order, or I don't even have them in alphabetical order. I don't know what order I have them in. But so your options are gain shield and powerful, deal 4x6 damage to the first enemy for 1 mana. For 4 mana, gain Arcane Barrier 3, Frost Barrier 3, Sharp Barrier 3, add up 3, and apply 15 Arcane to all enemies. Or 5 mana, deal 20 damage to any enemy, gain Purity 2 and Spellwave 3, Lifesteal. And then, most likely, if you take this, you're upgrading it, which point it's still 1 mana to create one of these. So effectively, you can add +1 to the cost of all of these because it costs 1 mana to play the card. So you can think of this as like effectively being a 4-cost card, 2-cost card, 5-cost card, 6-cost card. So this is then 5, it goes up an additional mana. So this is now 5 mana effectively, because again, we're factoring in that. 5 mana for 20 shield and powerful 3. 2 mana for 4x 8 damage. 5 mana for Arcane Barrier 4, Frost Barrier, so 4 of each barrier, Adept for 20 AoE Arcane, which with the Adept will be enough to be 2 Arcane detonations a lot of the time, especially if it's the first time you've done Arcane. Or 6 mana for 22 Lifesteal hit with Purity and Spellweave. So this card is really good. This card is really flexible. It can do a lot of things. It can fill a lot of roles. It is pretty common that at least one of these will be useful to your deck, because if you have the mana, like this is Purity and Lifesteal, which is great for like dealing with any chip damage you've taken and protect you from incoming debuffs, which the all the forms of Mudrara love to do debuffs that you really want to block. It gives you the possibility of getting shield and powerful. It gives you the ability of setting up barriers to increase your max status, and area of effect arcane to work on dispelling things, which can also be relevant if you kill the second form of Mudrara splits into a bunch of enemies that all have frenzy. This will deal with the frenzy on all of them. And then this is just a massive single target damage spike, especially if you have powerful, for example, from this card, because it's not too hard to make this, massive damage from powerful stacking. So this is the one I usually take because I like having options on it. But the other card is also really good, and that is War Preparations. So War Preparations is 3 mana for a skill. You draw 1 card of each of the following types: mana, skill, spell, strike, blight, weather. So basically, you draw 1 of each type of card, which means this is 3 mana for potentially up to a draw 6. Drawing a blight, not usually good, but it does mean that you can draw that blight card so you can get rid of it with a transform. Because this draws a weather, this does mean that weather cards are already pretty good. You're already generally incentivized to take at least a couple if any good weathers show up on your route. But if you know that you're fighting Conquest, and you know that you don't necessarily care that much about the tactics, and you'll want war preparations, then it may be worth making sure you hold onto a weather card, just because this gets better if you can draw all the types. Likewise, if you are planning to pick this up, having just like one spell and one strike that's pretty good, even if it's not necessarily amazing, just to make this way better. I'm assuming you'll always have a skill. I'm assuming you'll always have mana. That's just usually a pretty safe bet. So yeah, I don't tend to take war preparations a lot because I like Conquering Tactics so much, but war preparations is absolutely a fantastic card that is still worth taking and is still very good. It's just not my preference usually. So that was Aspect of Conquest. Are you seeing now why I split this into a bunch of different videos? That is the second of 5 aspects. We got 3 more of these to go, and we've got several mood rares after that. So I will see you tomorrow for the aspect of destruction. I had some fun figuring out exactly how the heck that thing's actions work. I am excited to tell you all about it. But that will be next time. Until then, toodles.